Hello and welcome to another edition of East of Ethnia. We're not going to talk too long today. There isn't a tremendous amount to talk about, but there is something. Some local elections. This was a repeat run of local elections that were dismissed as failed or fraudulent the first time they were done in December in uh, in Serbia, and they had some results that were mostly predictable, but in some ways kind of interesting. A lot of what you saw were the same old things that you would be led to expect. Very, very heavy favoring of the ruling party, the so-called Serbian Progressive Party, which is one of the parties to have its roots in the Serbian Radical Party, the one from the 1990s, not the one from the early part of the 20th century. Um, some of the success of this party, SNS, Alexander Vucic's party, came from genuine popular support that it has and relying on networks controlling the distribution of benefits that gives it access to a large number of votes that are provided in exchange for things like employment and public services. And some of them are the result of different types of electoral fraud that we saw in previous elections and the last time around, and we saw them again. And this included the maintenance of parallel voting lists. It included different types of pressure on voters exercised through call centers, many of them located at strategic spots near polling places so that the turnout of people who had promised to vote for the party could be monitored. You also saw, as you saw in December, votes cast by people registered in particular places who do not live at those places where they are registered. And surprisingly, what you saw, some of the strongest results for the opposition in this election. There were some strong results in Belgrade, including in the district of Vračar, where the opposition was prevented from forming a majority in the local government by dissension in its ranks. But the opposition won a majority in the city assembly of Čačak, and the result in Niš is still in dispute. And I want to talk a little bit about Niš, because it looks as though in Niš, with the emergence of a relatively independent protest movement, there was a good possibility for victory by the opposition in Niš. In fact, on the night of the election, as votes were being counted, it looked as though the opposition had won a victory in Niš. But here's what happened. One small party, because the results were close, by switching sides, was able to provide the one vote that the ruling party needed in order to form a majority. And which is this party? The party is called Ruska Stranka, the Russian party. So this is a party that is registered as an ethnic minority party representing an ethnic minority group. And this is legally important because if a party is a representative party for an ethnic minority group that is recognized, then it doesn't need to receive a certain percentage of the vote. It doesn't need to pass a threshold in order to gain representation in the assembly. It is guaranteed a seat. And so the Russian party in Niš had its guaranteed seat occupied by the leader of the party, Tihomir Perić. You'll notice that Tihomir Perić is not a typically Russian name. It's not a Russian name at all. In fact, commenting on the elections after the votes were counted, when Tihomir Perić was asked by reporters, they asked him questions in Russian and so on, asked him to speak in Russian. Tihomir Perić is not Russian and does not speak Russian. How many Russians are there in Niš? As far as the census knows, there are 121 Russians in Niš, so not a very large population in a city of about 350,000. How many of those 121 Russians are citizens of Serbia with the ability to vote in state level and local level elections? That we're not sure about. But how many are members of the Russian party? 2. So this is a party that claims to be a party representing an ethnic minority, but in fact, it's a party making use of this provision in the law that provides guaranteed representation for ethnic minorities in order to gain a seat and get influence at times like this. This is not the first time that this has happened in politics in Serbia. In an earlier election, a right-wing political commentator, a fellow by the name of George Vukadinovic, ran as the head of the list for a party that had the name none of the above. And this was a party that was taken over. It was taken over as a party representing the Vlach minority, so also a party that was guaranteed a seat. And that's how this party was able to get its person who did not have an appreciable level of public support for a brief time as a member of parliament. I mean, this Tikhomir Perich, head of the Russian party in Nish, is an interesting fellow too, because for many years over the last 3 decades, he was a prominent figure in another party in Nish and in the area around Nish. He was the local chair for many years of the Serbian Radical Party, that is the neo-Nazi party, which provided the roots out of which the currently governing party in Serbia, led by Alexander Vucic, came. Alexander Vucic was the general secretary at the state level of the Serbian Radical Party. So all of this looks a little bit weird and dirty and fraudulent, and that it certainly is. The question is, what does it show? Well, one thing that it shows is, look, this legal provision that guarantees representation in the parliament and in local assemblies to ethnic minority parties, this is a good law. This is designed to assure that the voice of ethnic minority groups, even if they are not numerous enough to guarantee representation at a certain level, will be heard. The problem with this law is not in the intent of the law or in the existence of the law. It is in the space between, the distance between the intent of the law and the way in which it is implemented. It is very clearly open to manipulation by groups of citizens forming parties claiming to be things that they are not. A second thing that it shows is that what we're now seeing, the so-called Progressive Party, Alexander Vucic's party, it always looked like a mystery in previous elections because it was a party with majority support. It would win elections without engaging in fraud and manipulation, and it did it anyway. What we're seeing now is that now they need that fraud and manipulation, and they're not going to win elections without those things. And so they're using it. So what were they doing in the past? Maybe they were practicing. Maybe they were keeping the machine running for the time when it really became necessary. And the third thing that it shows is something unique about elections. We tend to think of elections as confronting citizens with a set of questions that will be resolved by their behavior when they vote on the day of the election. And that is, in fact, apparently not the case. A lot of the activity that determines who wins or who loses in the election, who is represented and who is not represented, who forms governments at the state level and at the local level, these are decided after the election through practices and through institutions that do not include the public. So don't start closing your eyes and stop paying attention once people have voted. There's more stuff that's going to go on, and that might be the really interesting stuff. And that's what we got for today. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.